outsiders is my grandpa. Grandpa, could you state for the recording what war and branch of service you served in?
I served in the Vietnam War, and I was in the United States Navy.
What was your rank?
I was an E5 Petty Officer Second Class, and I was a radioman.
Where did you serve?
I served aboard the USS Meredith, which was a Gearing-class destroyer that was home ported out of Mayport, Florida.
How many years were you in the service?
I was 2 years on inactive reserve and 4 years on active duty.
So you served in the Navy?
Yes, I did.
Where were you living at the time?
I was living in LaGros, Indiana at the time that I decided to go in the Navy.
How did you happen to serve in this war?
Basically, a lot of my friends were being drafted, and I decided to go ahead and join the Navy. And in the summer of 1968, my ship got orders that we were going to ship out and go over to the war and help out.
What were you doing before you were drafted or enlisted?
After I graduated from high school, I got a job working for Art Metals in Wabash as an accounting assistant. And I basically did payroll clerk type work and helped put together purchase orders.
Did anyone else in your family serve in the military?
Yes, my dad was in the Navy. I had an uncle that was in the Air Force and a couple of uncles that were in the Navy.
How did you choose the branch of service you served in?
Mainly I chose the Navy because my dad and 2 of my uncles were in the Navy.
What kind of training did you have?
Went to boot camp first, and I have a picture of my class in boot camp. Then after boot camp, I went to basic electronic and engineering school because they decided during boot camp they did a lot of testing, and I had an aptitude for working with electronics and clerk type work. And after boot camp, then I went to basic electronic and engineering school in Great Lakes Naval Training Center in Chicago, and then after that I went to radioman school in Bainbridge, Maryland. That was a 16-week school where I learned how to operate transmitters, receivers. I learned Morse code, learned the clerical duties of how to take care of messages, route messages, encrypt and decrypt messages, which is like coding. And here I have a picture of my graduating class of radioman school. Graduated in the summer of 1967.
Did you happen to form with any new friends overboard?
Yes, I made real good friends with one guy that was in my boot camp class that lived in Chicago, and when we had short liberties during boot camp on the weekend, sometimes we would go to his house and his mom would fix us dinner. And we also went to radioman school together, but then after radioman school he got assigned to a different ship than I did.
Where did you serve?
After I got out of radioman school, I went to the Mediterranean to Ceuta Bay, Crete, and got on board my ship. The ship was already in the Mediterranean. I finished out that tour with the ship, and while we were in the Mediterranean, we went to Naples, Italy, Toronto, Italy. Also went to Malta, Barcelona, Spain. Then after that tour of duty was up, we went through the Straits of Gibraltar and went back to our home port, Mayport, Florida. And then, like I said, we got assigned to go to Vietnam, so we went to the shipyards in Charleston, South Carolina, to have extra armament put on board, and this new interesting top secret device, which was called facsimile, which we used to get maps and so forth while we were in Vietnam. Passed through the Panama Canal, went to Vietnam. On the way to Vietnam, We stopped in Acapulco, Mexico, and San Diego, California. And we also went to Hawaii and Midway Island and Guam, and went to Hong Kong, Kaohsiung, Taiwan, and Japan. Went to Sasebo, Japan, Yokosuka, Japan, and Tokyo. Then after that, we went back to Mayport, Florida, and I finished out my tour, and I came back to Allegro, Indiana.
What kind of action or duties did you have?
As a radioman, I was responsible for all of the shipboard communications, all the transmitters, receivers, the antennas, responsible for distributing the messages to whoever they were supposed to go to.
How did you stay in touch with those back home?
Back then, there was no such thing as email and internet, cell phones, and so forth. So basically, you would write letters back and forth, and then as a radioman, sometimes we were able to bring up transmitters and receivers and hook up to guys that had shortwave radios, and we would, through them, sometimes we'd be able to get hooked up with telephone contacts to call people that were back at home.
What kind of activities did you guys do off duty?
Well, we were off duty. One of our favorite things that the crew that I ran around with, since we went to so many different places, is we were interested in trying out all the different kinds of food all over the world. So what we would like to do would be find a nice restaurant, go to the restaurant, and then we would order one of everything that was on the menu, then we would all sample it. And I have a picture of a restaurant that we went to in Toronto, Italy, and also have a picture of a bunch of my friends that I used to hang out with, where we would go to try all the different kinds of food everywhere we went.
Were you still overseas when the war ended, or were you back home?
We came back to our home port before the war was over. Actually, the war in Vietnam didn't end until 1975, and we were done at the end of 1969, and we went back to our home port.
What kind of stuff and what all did you guys do?
While we were in the war,
Yeah.
what did we do? Well, we did basically anti-aircraft support for the aircraft carrier John F. Kennedy. We also were a submarine chaser. We had ASROC missiles, anti-submarine warfare missiles, which we would make sure that no submarines were coming to get the aircraft carrier. We also did search and rescue, like if an airplane got shot down, which sometimes happened. It was our duty to put together a team and go into the jungle and get the pilot and the plane, the famous black box that you hear about, and that kind of stuff out. We also did shelling for ground support. My unit was given a citation by the commander of the 7th Fleet for helping the Marines during Operation Bold Pursuit and Operation Mighty Play, which were combat missions where we were fighting the Vietnamese along the Cambodia-Laos border in the northern part of South Vietnam.
What all did you guys enjoy doing, activity-wise?
The group I was with, we liked to do body surfing and board surfing. I learned how to surf while I was in the Navy. So when we stopped in Hawaii, a couple of us rented a car and went out and rented surfboards and went surfing. Also, a lot of times when we were out at sea, we would barbecue on the fantail of the ship, which was the back of the ship. We had some 50-gallon fuel barrels that we'd cut in half, and we'd have barbecues. We would also have swim over the side of the ship sometimes.
physicals did you guys have?
Kind of physicals.
Yeah.
Basically, once a year you got a complete physical. We had a hospital corpsman on board, which would give us our physicals, and then we would have checkups every now and then, like dental checkups and things like that. And then if anything needed to be done, then we would have to go to a carrier or somewhere like that where they had doctors.
What was the food like on the ship?
Usually it was pretty good. We seemed to have pretty decent cooks. One thing about shipboard life, when you first went on board ship, if you were an E4 below an E4, which was a seaman in the Navy, your first 4 months on board ship, you got to work in the galley. So I got a turn working in the galley, helping fix the food. And the cook at the time found out that I knew a little bit about cooking because of my family background, so he put me in charge of the cold foods and the salad bar. So I was responsible at that time for making salads and any kind of cold foods that we would have.
What kind of food did you guys have on the ship?
Basically, we had steaks and eggs and chicken, same kind of food that you normally eat, vegetables and meats.
Did you guys enjoy being overseas, or was it just like nothing?
Oh yeah, I really enjoyed traveling and seeing all the different places and the different cultures, exploring new things.
And you also said when you weren't doing the radio, you helped carry shells.
Yes, whenever we had to refuel the ship or we had to rearm the ship I had, we had 5-inch gun mounts, and the 5-inch gun shells were 5-inch diameter by about 30 inches long, and they weighed anywhere from 35 to 50 pounds. And everyone on board ship would have to help carry the ammunition down to the magazines, which the magazines were about 4 decks below the main deck. At any time we took stores on board, food, stuff like that, everybody had to help put it away. And then once you made a certain rank of E5, then you didn't have to carry the food and ammunition anymore. You were then a supervisor, and you supervised. So once I made the rank of E5, I was a supervisor, and I didn't have to carry the food and ammunition anymore.
Did you ever get to use the guns, or were you just use the radios and help carry shells?
I carried a Colt 45 sidearm, a Navy Colt, had a 7-round clip in it, and I had to qualify on the Colt. And I also was qualified on the 15 millimeter anti-aircraft machine guns. I didn't really have to ever shoot them, but I was qualified to use them. And I was also qualified on a Thompson submachine gun and I think it was a 30 caliber carbine. Because on shipboard life, the way it worked, everyone had to be trained to do several different things, because if for something would happen, like if you would get hit by a bomb or a torpedo or something like that, and people got killed, and you had to step in and take over and do what needed to be done, whatever it was. So I was trained on the machine guns and the anti-aircraft guns, so if something happened to the ones that normally did that, I could step up and use them.
Did you ever get to the point where you could use the guns on the ship, or?
I don't understand your question, I'm sorry.
The guns on your ship, did you ever get to use
Do we ever fire them in anger?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely we did.
Did you ever get put in charge of one, or?
No, normally when they were firing the guns, like we did support fire for the Marines that were on shore, my job at that time was to communicate with the airplanes and the spotters on the ground to communicate to the people that were shooting the guns to tell them where to shoot.
Did you
So,
ever, did you ever get to go on the airplanes or?
I went on a Huey helicopter once because I volunteered one time to go in on a search and rescue mission. So they brought a Huey helicopter out and took us in. And also, when I went on board my ship, I flew overseas to Naples, and then from Naples they put me on a mail ship that was taking mail around to the different places where the Navy ships were, and I flew on that airplane till I got to Suda Bay Creek where my ship was, and got off of that plane.
What all kinds of medals and pictures of your ship did you have?
Uh, I have this picture of my ship that I was on, the USS Meredith DD-890. This picture was taken as we were steaming out of San Diego going to Vietnam. The medals that I received while I was in the Navy, I got the Armed Forces Expeditionary Medal. I have those here on a hat. This is the Armed Forces Expeditionary Medal, Good Conduct Medal. I got the Navy Reserve Active Duty Medal, or National Defense Service Medal, Vietnam Service Medal, and the Republic of Vietnam Service Medal. And this Armed Forces Expeditionary Medal I got because while we were in Vietnam, North Korea shot down one of our planes, and we were chosen as one of the ships that went up there along with the John F. Kennedy and the Sam Houston, which is a nuclear submarine, and our squadron went up there to help get the pilots back and so forth from the plane that they shot down.
Did you have any special kinds of medals?
One medal that I got that's really special to me is after I got out of the Navy, and it was probably in 1990, I think. My wife and I were down in Indianapolis at the Marion County Fairgrounds, and they had the traveling Vietnam War down there, or Vietnam Wall down there, and the Vietnam Veterans Association out of Indianapolis were doing a special ceremony where they had Sammy Davis there, who was a Medal of Honor winner from Indiana, and he was passing out medals to all Vietnam veterans from the state of Indiana in recognition of our service. And so I went forward and said that I was a Vietnam veteran from Indiana, and they checked the list and I was on the list. So Sammy Davis gave me this medal, and it's really special to me.
Do you have any other medals you'd like to talk about, or?
No, that pretty much is it.
Do you have any other pictures, or?
I have, while we were in Vietnam, one of the things that we did, a storm came through and did a lot of damage along the shore, and it pushed a small fishing boat out into the main ocean, and we rescued a man and his boy off of a raft that they made out of parts of their fishing boat out of bamboo, and that was kind of special to me. Another thing that we did, one of the ships in our squadron, the USS Noah, before I went on board back in the early 1960s, when John Glenn went up in space, they were the ship that picked him up out of the water. And when they did that, they painted gold footprints on the deck of that ship where he walked from the fantail up to the main bridge. And we did a lot of, when we were in our home port of Mayport, Florida, we did a lot of rescue work whenever they fired off the missiles with astronauts in them. And as a result of that, in 1969, when we were in Vietnam, Apollo 11 went up, and they were due to splash down in the Pacific. And so they asked our squadron to go out from fighting the war in Vietnam and be part of the search and rescue team for the recovery of Apollo 11. So that was pretty special. We weren't part of the actual rescue. We were about 100 miles away when the capsule splashed down, but we were part of the team that was tracking them on radar and seeing where they were and communicating with them.
What year did you get back from the Navy?
1970 is when I got out. I got out in the late summer of 1970.
So how long did you serve?
I served 6 years total. I was in the inactive reserve for 2 years, and then I was on active duty 4 years, and I was on board the ship for 3.5 years.
What all did you guys do in the boot camp? Like, did you guys do activities?
In boot camp, you did a lot of physical activities. You learned about things that went on in the Navy. You learned all the different ranks in the Navy. You learned who to salute, who not to salute. You learned all about the Uniform Code of Military Justice. You learned about all the Geneva Convention rules of what to do if you were caught as a prisoner of war or anything like that. Basically learned all about shipboard life. You learned how to fight fires. One of the things we had to do is you had to learn how to swim. And one of the tests that they did is they would fill a swimming pool up with fuel oil and set it on fire, and you had to jump into the pool full of fire and learn how to splash the oil away from you so that you didn't burn up. It was all part of how to survive if you were on a ship that got hit and would catch on fire, and oil would get all over the water and be on fire. So a lot of survival techniques and what to do when you were on board a ship.
Do you remember how you guys would splash the oil away from you so it wouldn't burn you? Or
Basically, you would tread water with your feet and then just splash your hands above your head like that and go up and get a breath of air and then go back down under the water.
do you have anything else you'd like to talk about? Or
I don't know what it would be.
do you have other pictures you want to talk about? Medals or
Well, basically, one of the questions on the sheet was, what did your family do when you came home? So I have some pictures here of when I came home. My family rolled out the red carpet on the patio behind the house, and they had signs in the yard, "Welcome home," and "Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, let the USS Meredith rust," and things like that. So when I drove into the driveway where Mom and Dad lived, they had a big party going on for me.
were you happy when you got back home?
Oh yeah, very happy.
Was it hard to be over there knowing you left your family back at home, or did you
Yeah.
get used to it?
No, you never got used to being away from home. It was hard.
So you don't know anything else you want to talk about?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. Thank you very much.